the northeastern corner of Vermont, where mist clings to the mountains like reluctant ghosts, sits the forgotten town of Milford Haven. Most maps omit it entirely, as if cartographers collectively agreed some places are better left unfound. Here, nestled between ancient pines and a river that runs unnaturally silent, the Harper School stood for nearly a century, a Victorian monstrosity of brick and narrow windows that locals said resembled the bars of a cage. According to census records from 1938, 16 children entered the school's iron gates that autumn. By winter, when questioned by a visiting education inspector, the headmistress claimed no new students had been admitted that year. The ledgers showed no entries. Class photographs revealed no new faces. 16 children had simply ceased to exist. For 87 years, a collection of personal journals, administrative correspondence, and sealed medical reports remained locked in the Milford County Historical Society's restricted archives. In 2016, when the mandatory sequestration period expired, what emerged wasn't a tale of supernatural disappearance or mass hysteria, as local legends suggested. The truth, preserved in faded ink and clinical language, speaks of something far more methodical and far more human. Are you brave enough to know what really happened behind those brick walls? What experimental methods were justified in the name of progress? I must warn you, this isn't a story about ghosts or monsters. This is about how rationality, when divorced from compassion, becomes its own kind of darkness. The fall of 1938 brought unusually heavy rains to Vermont. Farmers struggled with flooded fields, and the roads in and out of Milford Haven frequently washed out, sometimes for weeks at a time. The isolation wasn't new to locals. They had always lived somewhat removed from the accelerating modern world, preserving traditions and hierarchies that larger cities had begun to abandon. The town operated around three centers of power: the church, the mayor's office, and Harper School. Harper School wasn't merely an educational institution, but the physical embodiment of the town's aspirations toward refinement. Built in 1847 by lumber baron Edmund Harper to cultivate civilization in the wilderness, its architecture mimicked European boarding schools with imposing stone stairs, wood-paneled halls, and a clock tower that could be heard for miles. By 1938, the school had become known for rehabilitating troubled youth from wealthy New England families, children too difficult, too emotional, or too unusual for conventional education. That year, Dr. Eleanor Webb assumed the position of headmistress, arriving from Boston with impressive credentials and radical theories about childhood development. Tall and severe, with prematurely silver hair always arranged in a perfect chignon, Dr. Webb spoke with quiet authority that silenced rooms. Her papers on behavioral reconstruction had earned both acclaim and whispered criticism in academic circles. To the Milford Haven School Board, however, she represented prestige, a Harvard-educated psychologist choosing their small institution for what she called important developmental research. "The modern child faces unprecedented challenges," she wrote in her acceptance letter. "Our educational methods must evolve accordingly. I believe Harper School can become a beacon of progressive intervention techniques that will influence American education for generations." The town embraced her vision with little questioning. Progress had largely bypassed Milford Haven, and Dr. Webb's presence felt like validation. When she requested extensive renovations to the school's east wing, adding private therapeutic spaces and a medical facility, the board unanimously approved, despite the considerable expense. Jonas Fletcher was 12 when he first noticed something wasn't right. The son of the local postmaster, he spent most afternoons delivering mail throughout town, including to Harper School. In late September, while delivering a package to the administrative office, he glimpsed a group of unfamiliar children, pale, quiet, uniformly dressed, being led down a corridor by one of Dr. Webb's assistants. When he mentioned these new kids to his father at dinner, the older man furrowed his brow. "There aren't any new families in town, son." Must be visiting relatives from the city. But Jonas saw them again 2 days later, through a ground-floor window. 16 children, he counted, standing in a perfect line, staring straight ahead as a woman in a white coat moved between them, examining their eyes with a small light. What struck him wasn't just their stillness, but their emptiness. Children in schoolyards shouted and fidgeted and laughed. These children might as well have been statues. The following week, delivering letters to Dr. Webb's office, Jonas overheard a conversation that would haunt him for decades. Subject 7 continues to resist the reconditioning protocol. A man's voice said, "Increased doses haven't suppressed the emotional outbursts. Then we'll try the new procedure." Dr. Webb replied, her tone clinically detached. The prefrontal approach showed promising results in Boston. Prepare the suite for tomorrow morning. But she's only 8. Age is irrelevant to neuroplasticity, Dr. Harris. In fact, the younger subjects adapt more completely. That's the entire premise of our work. When Jonas accidentally dropped his mailbag, the conversation abruptly stopped. Dr. Webb emerged from her office, face composed into a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Young Mr. Fletcher, isn't it? You're early today." "Yes, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What did you hear?" "Nothing, ma'am. Just dropped the mail." She studied him for a long moment before nodding. Children often misunderstand adult matters, Jonas. It can lead to unfortunate confusions and unnecessary concerns. Do you understand? He nodded, though he didn't understand. Not really. But something in her voice made him want to escape her attention as quickly as possible. That night, Jonas told his father what he'd heard. The postmaster's face grew serious as he placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Jonas, Dr. Webb is bringing modern educational methods to our town. Sometimes new ideas sound strange when taken out of context, but you need to be careful about spreading stories, especially about someone so respected." "But Dad, they didn't sound like they were talking about school." "That's enough. Harper School has educated Milford Haven children for generations. Your grandfather went there. I went there. It's the foundation of our community." Jonas wanted to argue that the children he'd seen weren't from their community at all, but something in his father's tone told him to stay silent. It was the same tone adults used when certain subjects were closed to children: death, money troubles, or the special hospital, where his mother had been sent after his little sister was born. In early October, Jonas noticed something even stranger. Delivering a registered letter that required Dr. Webb's signature, he was kept waiting in the administrative office for nearly 30 minutes. On the secretary's desk lay an open ledger, the school's enrollment record. Glancing at it when the secretary stepped out, Jonas confirmed what he'd suspected. No new students had been officially registered that fall. 16 children who didn't exist on paper, yet walked the halls of Harper School. When Dr. Webb finally arrived to sign for the letter, she caught Jonas looking at the ledger. Something cold flickered behind her eyes before she smiled. "Curious about our record-keeping, Mr. Fletcher? Administrative precision is the backbone of any institution." "Yes, ma'am," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. As he turned to leave, she added, "Jonas, I'd like you to start leaving the school's mail with the gate attendant from now on. The interior hallways aren't appropriate for non-school personnel. For safety reasons, you understand." That night, Jonas couldn't sleep. The image of those blank-faced children standing in line haunted him. He decided to watch the school from the small copse of trees across the street, arriving before dawn with his father's binoculars. What he witnessed that grey morning would change him forever. A black automobile with Massachusetts plates arrived at 5:30 a.m. From it emerged a girl approximately his age, accompanied by a well-dressed couple. The woman was weeping quietly, while the man kept a firm hand on the girl's shoulder. Dr. Webb greeted them at the entrance, her voice carrying faintly across the morning mist. Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, I assure you this is the right decision. Catherine's behavioral abnormalities will only worsen without intervention. Our methods have helped dozens of children return to normal, productive lives. The girl, Catherine, stood woodenly between them, her face expressionless except for her eyes, which darted around like trapped things. How long will the treatment take? The father asked. Every child responds differently. Some require only a few months, others need more extensive reconditioning. The important thing is that you've acted before her emotional instability became permanently embedded. She was always so bright, the mother whispered. Until last year, the tantrums, the defiance, the inappropriate questions. Classic signs of developmental maladjustment. Dr. Webb nodded sympathetically. We'll correct these tendencies before they define her future. Many parents come to us too late. Jonas watched as Catherine was led inside, never once looking back at her parents. The couple returned to their automobile, the mother openly sobbing now, the father rigid and silent. As they drove away, Jonas realized with a chill that no goodbyes had been exchanged. Over the next 2 weeks, Jonas observed 3 more arrivals, all similar in pattern. Worried parents, children who seemed sedated or resigned, and always Dr. Webb's reassuring presence, promising restoration and normality. None of these children appeared in town records or school registers. They simply vanished behind Harper School's heavy doors. The weather worsened through October. Heavy rains turned to early snow, and for nearly a week, the roads in and out of Milford Haven were impassable. During this isolation, Jonas noticed increased activity in the school's east wing at night, lights burning until dawn, shadows moving behind frosted windows, and once, a sound that might have been screaming, though his father insisted it was just the wind. On Halloween night, while other children collected candy from neighboring houses, Jonas returned to his observation post among the trees. At precisely 10 p.m., lights flooded the east wing's top floor, the newly renovated section. Through his binoculars he could make out figures in white coats moving around what appeared to be an operating theater. A small form lay on a central table, immobile. His hands shaking, Jonas almost dropped the binoculars when a hand touched his shoulder. Turning in terror, he found himself face to face with Ruth Miller, the school's cook, her eyes wide with fear. "You shouldn't be watching," she whispered urgently. "It's dangerous to know." "Know what? What are they doing to those children?" Ruth glanced nervously toward the school. "I'm leaving tonight. You should tell your father to do the same." "But what's happening there? I saw children, 16 of them, but they're not on any school records." The woman's weathered face crumpled. "They're making them better, they say, fixing what's wrong inside their heads. The crying ones stop crying, the angry ones stop fighting. They become perfect, empty." She clutched his arm. "I've worked in that kitchen 20 years, served generations of Harper children. These aren't the same. These children arrive with light in their eyes and leave with nothing." "Leave? They let them go?" "When they're finished, when the treatments take completely, they send them home perfect and obedient. Some parents write letters thanking Dr. Webb for the miracle transformation." Ruth's voice broke. "But I've seen them in between, child. I've seen what happens before the emptiness sets in." Before Jonas could ask more, a beam of light swept across the trees, a security guard making rounds. Ruth vanished into the darkness with one last whispered warning. "Tell no one you saw me." The next morning, word spread through town that Ruth Miller had fled in the night, leaving behind most of her possessions. Dr. Webb informed the staff that the cook had received news of a family emergency, but Jonas knew better. What he didn't know, couldn't have known, was that Ruth Miller never reached her sister's home in Burlington. Her automobile was found abandoned near Stowe, with no sign of the woman herself. The local authorities, after a cursory investigation, concluded she must have continued on foot and fallen victim to the harsh weather. Jonas tried to tell his father everything, but the postmaster had heard enough. "This has gone too far, son. These fantasies about secret patients and midnight operations, do you realize how this sounds? Dr. Webb has brought prestige to our town. Several board members mentioned she might even secure federal research funding for Harper School. But Dad, the children, enough. I won't have my son spreading malicious rumors that could damage Harper School's reputation. You're forbidden from delivering mail there from now on. Tucker can take over the route." Isolated from his only connection to Harper School, Jonas felt increasingly helpless. As November deepened into December, he noticed subtle changes throughout Milford Haven. Teachers from the school's regular classes, those who had been there for years, began to leave. Citing better opportunities in larger towns or sudden family obligations, they were replaced by serious-faced strangers who arrived with letters of recommendation from prestigious universities. The new staff lived on campus rather than integrating into town life, creating an invisible boundary between Harper School and the community it had once been central to. During this time, Jonas befriended Catherine Adams, a quiet girl who worked at the town library. Unlike most locals who avoided discussing Harper School, Catherine seemed curious about his observations. Her father was Milford Haven's only doctor, though he had been increasingly excluded from school matters since Dr. Webb established her own medical facility. "Dad says she's brought in specialists," Catherine told Jonas one snowy afternoon as they shelved books. He was supposed to be the school physician, like his father before him. Now they only call him for the most basic illnesses. Anything unusual, they handle internally. "What kind of unusual?" Catherine glanced around the empty library before lowering her voice. 2 weeks ago, Sheriff Wilson's nephew fell during recess and fractured his arm. Instead of calling my father, they took him to the East Wing. When he returned to class the next day, he wouldn't talk about what happened there. He just stared at his desk. Dad saw him in town yesterday. The boy didn't even recognize him, though Dad had delivered him and treated him since birth. The following week, Catherine slipped Jonas a folded note during his mail delivery. Inside was a hastily drawn map of Harper School with staff schedules and door codes. "My cousin works as a janitor there," she explained when they met behind the library after hours. "He's scared, Jonas. Says there are rooms in the basement where they keep records, patient files that aren't in the official system. He's heard Dr. Webb discussing specimens and trial subjects when she thinks no one is listening." "We need to see those files," Jonas decided. "But how? They won't let me near the place anymore." Catherine's eyes gleamed with determination. "The annual Christmas concert is tomorrow night. Everyone will be in the auditorium. My cousin says the basement records room is left unattended then. You want to break in? Catherine, if we're caught, what's worse? Getting in trouble for snooping or letting whatever's happening there continue?" The Harper School Christmas concert was Milford Haven's most prestigious annual event. Families dressed in their finest clothes, trustees and donors arrived from surrounding counties, and the school choir performed traditional carols beneath crystal chandeliers in the ornate auditorium. This year, Dr. Webb had expanded the program to include what the invitation called a special demonstration of our innovative educational methodologies. Jonas and his father attended as they did every year, though the boy's attention was far from the music. At precisely 8:15 p.m., when the program reached its intermission, he excused himself to use the restroom, and instead slipped down a service corridor toward the basement stairs, where Catherine was waiting as planned. "The records room is through there," she whispered, pointing to a heavy door at the end of a dimly lit hallway. "We have 15 minutes before intermission ends." Using the code Catherine's cousin had provided, they entered a room lined with metal filing cabinets. The air smelled of chemicals and paper dust. "Look for anything about the 16 new children," Jonas instructed as they began carefully opening drawers. It took precious minutes to understand the filing system, which seemed deliberately obscured. Rather than names, The files used numeric identifiers, Subject 1A through Subject 16F. Catherine found them in a locked cabinet labeled Frontal Protocol, Active Cases. "Help me with these," she whispered, struggling with the weight of the files. Together, they spread the documents across a large table. What they found turned their blood cold. Each file contained before and after photographs of children aged 7 to 13, all from wealthy or influential families across New England. Medical histories detailed behaviors labeled as problematic or deviant, excessive emotionality, questioning authority, creative thinking patterns deemed abnormal, resistance to social conditioning. Parental consent forms authorized Dr. Webb to employ any necessary therapeutic interventions to correct developmental abnormalities. But it was the treatment logs that horrified them most. Detailed notes documented graduated cerebral modification procedures, experimental surgeries performed on conscious children to observe real-time changes in behavior and cognition. Sketches showed precise locations where surgical tools were inserted through the eye socket to sever connections in the frontal lobe, the part of the brain controlling personality, decision-making, and emotional regulation. "They're not treating them," Catherine whispered, her voice breaking. "They're erasing them." The documentation was clinically thorough. Recordings of children's responses before, during, and after procedures. Notes on which personality aspects were successfully neutralized. Recommendations for maintenance therapies to prevent the redevelopment of undesirable traits. Some files included correspondence with government agencies interested in the practical applications of Dr. Webb's methods for behavioral standardization. Subject 4C demonstrates ideal outcome. One notation read, "Complete elimination of creative deviation and emotional volatility. Maintains cognitive function for academic and practical tasks while exhibiting perfect compliance with authority. Recommend accelerated processing for remaining subjects." Photographs showed the progression. Children entering with expressive faces and leaving with vacant eyes, their postures rigid, their expressions blank. Before and after writing samples revealed personalities gradually erased, vibrant stories replaced by mechanically perfect penmanship reporting only observable facts. A separate section labeled Reintegration Protocols outlined how these children would eventually be returned to their families as success cases for Dr. Webb's methods, living advertisements for her work. Parents would be told their difficult, emotional, or creative children had been successfully normalized through advanced behavioral techniques. The truth of what occurred would remain hidden behind medical terminology and institutional authority. "We have to tell someone," Jonas said, frantically gathering documents as evidence. "Who would believe us? Look at these authorization signatures. Judges, politicians, university regents, they're all complicit." A noise in the hallway froze them both. Footsteps approached, measured, unhurried, distinctive. "Dr. Webb," Jonas mouthed silently. They doused the light and pressed themselves into the shadows behind a cabinet. The door opened. A thin beam of light swept across the room. "I know you're in here." Dr. Webb's voice came softly through the darkness. "Children always underestimate adult awareness. Did you think we don't monitor our security systems? That we don't notice when restricted files are accessed?" Jonas held his breath, clutching the documents they'd collected. Beside him, Catherine trembled. "What you've seen here is beyond your understanding," Dr. Webb continued, moving into the room. "We're perfecting children who would otherwise be limited by their own emotional instability, creating minds that function optimally without the burdens of excessive feeling or imagination. The future requires humans who can perform consistently, reliably, without the unpredictability that emotions create." Her footsteps stopped just feet from their hiding place. "Jonas Fletcher, your curiosity has been noted since September, and Catherine Adams, how disappointing." Your father has been so cooperative with our program, never questioning our methods despite his own outdated medical training. Catherine gasped beside him. Yes, child. Who do you think refers certain patients to us? Those he deems hysterical or unmanageable. Doctors understand the need for difficult interventions. The revelation hit Catherine like a physical blow. Jonas felt her body sag against him. Come out now, Dr. Webb commanded. We can discuss what you've seen rationally. You're both intelligent children. You could benefit from our advanced educational approach. Instead of emerging, Jonas pulled Catherine toward a second door he'd noticed earlier, a service exit. They burst through it into a narrow corridor as alarm bells began to ring throughout the building. This way, he hissed, still clutching the damning files as they fled through the basement labyrinth. Behind them, Dr. Webb's voice echoed over a newly installed PA system. Security alert. 2 students experiencing emotional distress are loose in the lower level. Exercise caution. They may be confused or combative due to their condition. They emerged into the bitter December night through a coal chute, the concert still audible from the main building. Snow had begun falling heavily, providing cover as they ran toward town. Where can we go? Catherine panted. They'll check our homes first. Jonas thought quickly. The train station. The evening express to Burlington leaves in 30 minutes. We can contact the state authorities from there. As they ran through accumulating snow, lights appeared behind them. Flashlights and automobile headlamps. The search had begun quickly, with Dr. Webb clearly unwilling to risk exposure. The train station was mercifully empty except for the station master, who knew Jonas from his mail route. Evening, Fletcher. Nasty night to be out. 2 tickets to Burlington, please, Jonas gasped, counting out precious coins from his pocket. The station master raised an eyebrow at their disheveled appearance and lack of luggage, but asked no questions as he slid 2 tickets across the counter. Platform 2, 5 minutes. They huddled in the shadows of the platform, watching the road for signs of pursuit. Catherine's face was alarmingly pale. My father, she whispered. Do you think he really knew? Jonas had no answer that wouldn't devastate her further. Instead, he squeezed her hand as the train's headlamp appeared around the bend, its approach obscured by the thickening snowfall. As they prepared to board, headlights swept into the station yard. Dr. Webb emerged from a black automobile, accompanied by 2 orderlies and Catherine's father, Dr. Adams. The man's face was a mask of concern as he called out, Catherine, thank God we found you. Dr. Webb says you've had some kind of episode. Paranoid delusions about the school. Stay away, Catherine shouted, backing toward the train. I saw the files. I know what you've been doing to those children. Dr. Adams approached slowly, hands outstretched. Sweetheart, you're confused. Dr. Webb explained everything. You accidentally took some medication meant for the patients. It's causing hallucinations. That's not true. Catherine, Dr. Webb interjected smoothly. Your father and I are concerned about your mental state. These fantasies about experimental procedures are textbook manifestations of adolescent schizophrenia. We've seen identical patterns in several patients. The train hissed to a stop beside them. Jonas pulled Catherine toward the open door, but she hesitated, looking at her father with desperate hope. Dad, please. You can't believe her. We saw the files. They're doing surgeries on children to remove their personalities. They're planning to do it to all of us eventually. Dr. Adams' expression wavered between doubt and medical authority. Catherine, these delusions sound very real to you right now, but I promise we can help. Come home, and we'll sort this out. For a terrible moment, Jonas thought Catherine might believe her father. Then her expression hardened. If you were really concerned, you'd look at the evidence. She gestured to the files Jonas still clutched. Read them yourself instead of taking her word. Dr. Adams reached for the files. But Dr. Webb smoothly intercepted, taking them herself. "I'll examine these, of course, but they're merely standard medical records being misinterpreted by frightened children." Her voice remained professional, but her eyes, when they met Jonas's, were cold with hatred. "These fantasies about brain surgeries and personality alteration, they're concerning symptoms, Dr. Adams. Your daughter needs immediate intervention." The train conductor called the final boarding. Jonas pulled Catherine onto the train as Dr. Webb nodded to the orderlies, who started forward. The doors closed just as they reached the platform. As the train pulled away, Jonas saw Dr. Adams watching them, uncertainty finally visible on his face. Dr. Webb was already leading him back to the automobile, one hand firmly on his elbow, speaking intently into his ear. "He doesn't fully know," Catherine said quietly as Milford Haven disappeared into the snowy darkness behind them. "He suspects something isn't right, but he trusts the system too much to believe it could be this wrong." They found an empty compartment and collapsed onto the seats, the adrenaline of their escape finally wearing off. Jonas spread the few documents they'd managed to keep. Most had been left behind in their flight, but what remained was still damning. Photographs of blank-faced children, surgical diagrams of the human brain with specific areas marked for modification, and a letter from a government official expressing interest in Dr. Webb's methods for possible application in correctional and military contexts. "Will anyone believe us?" Catherine whispered. "We're just children." The Burlington Gazette has an investigative reporter, Sarah Mitchell. "My father says she exposed that corrupt judge last year. We'll go to her first." As the train rocked northward through the storm, neither child noticed the conductor speaking quietly into a radio transmitter, or the telephone lines between Milford Haven and Burlington going mysteriously dead as the blizzard intensified. By the time they reached Burlington, police were waiting at the station, contacted, they said, about 2 runaways experiencing drug-induced psychosis. Despite their protests, Jonas and Catherine were separated and taken to Burlington General Hospital, where doctors had already been briefed by Dr. Webb about their shared delusional disorder. Their evidence was confiscated. Their claims were documented as symptoms. Within 24 hours, both children had been diagnosed with a newly classified condition that Dr. Webb herself had recently published in the Journal of Pediatric Psychology. Contagious adolescent paranoia syndrome, characterized by shared delusions and conspiratorial thinking, particularly directed at authority figures during puberty. What saved them in the end was Sarah Mitchell. The investigative reporter had received an anonymous package that morning, postmarked from Milford Haven the previous day, containing photocopies of some of Dr. Webb's files, along with a letter signed only "A Concerned Cook." Ruth Miller, before her disappearance, had seen enough to act. When Mitchell heard about 2 children brought in for psychiatric evaluation after making wild claims about Harper School, she convinced a sympathetic nurse to grant her 5 minutes with Jonas. Those 5 minutes were enough to recognize the truth in his desperate account. "I believe you," she told him quietly, "but we need more evidence. The copies I received aren't enough for publication. They could be dismissed as forgeries. And with your current diagnosis, your testimony alone won't stand against someone with Dr. Webb's credentials." "She's going to come for us," Jonas whispered. "She can't let us tell anyone what we saw." The reporter nodded grimly. "I have contacts at the state attorney's office. I can get you temporary protection, but we'll need something concrete to build a case." By morning, Dr. Webb had arrived at Burlington General with signed transfer orders for both children, citing her expertise in their rare condition and Harper School's specialized facilities for treatment. The hospital administration, impressed by her credentials and publications, prepared to release them into her custody. Hours before the transfer, however, an unexpected ally emerged. Dr. Adams, Catherine's father, appeared at the hospital, haggard and conflicted. After his daughter's flight, he had finally done what both children had begged. He looked more carefully at Dr. Webb's operation. I accessed her private files while she was arranging the transfer, he told Sarah Mitchell during a hasty meeting in the hospital cafeteria. What I found? God help me, the children were telling the truth. She's been performing experimental neurosurgery under the guise of behavioral therapy, lobotomizing children to make them compliant. Why would parents consent to this? Mitchell asked. Dr. Adams' face crumpled with shame. Because we told them it was therapeutic. Revolutionary behavioral modification. The consent forms use medical terminology no layperson could understand. They mention neural pathway adjustments and frontal release procedures, not surgical destruction of personality. The parents believe they're helping their children overcome emotional or behavioral problems. And you never suspected? I suspected something wasn't right with her methods. The children changed too dramatically. But I trusted the system, believed that Harvard-trained specialists must know better than a country doctor. His voice broke. I even referred troubled patients to her. Children who are now empty. With Dr. Adams' testimony and access to the complete medical records he'd copied, Sarah Mitchell had enough to contact federal authorities. By afternoon, agents from the Bureau of Investigation arrived to intercept Dr. Webb when she came to collect Jonas and Catherine. But Dr. Webb never appeared for the transfer. When authorities reached Harper School that evening, they found the facility in calculated disarray. The East Wing had been emptied of equipment, files had been burned in massive quantities, and Dr. Webb, along with her core staff, had vanished, along with any children still undergoing treatment. What followed was the largest investigation in Vermont's history to that point. Excavations of the school grounds revealed medical waste containing human tissue. Hidden chambers beneath the East Wing contained restraint chairs fitted with surgical head clamps. Partial records recovered from a water-damaged basement suggested that Harper School was merely one of several facilities in Dr. Webb's network, a pilot program testing methods that, if successful, would be implemented more broadly. Most disturbing were the communications with government officials expressing interest in the practical applications of personality erasure, creating perfectly obedient individuals incapable of questioning authority or exhibiting emotional reactions that might interfere with assigned duties. In January 1939, federal agents located 12 of the 16 missing children. They had been returned to their families as success stories, their problematic behaviors replaced with perfect compliance. Examination revealed surgical scars hidden beneath their hairlines, and neurological testing confirmed significant alterations to their frontal lobes. These children recognized their parents but exhibited no emotional attachment to them. They followed instructions flawlessly but initiated no independent actions. They could recite facts but produced no original thoughts. The families, when confronted with what had truly happened to their children, reacted with horror and denial in equal measure. Some refused to accept that they had consented to such procedures, despite their signatures on the forms. Others insisted that the changes in their children were positive, pointing to improved academic performance and the absence of previous behavioral problems. "She's so much easier now," one mother told investigators, even as her daughter sat beside her staring blankly at the wall. "Before, she was always questioning everything, getting upset, wanting to paint instead of study. Now she does exactly as she's told." 4 children were never found. Dr. Eleanor Webb herself disappeared completely. Rumors placed her in Argentina, in Russia, in government facilities too classified to name. Her research, however, did not disappear but rather went underground, incorporated into classified programs exploring the limits of behavioral control and personality restructuring. Jonas Fletcher and Catherine Adams both testified before a closed congressional committee in 1940, but the full findings were sealed under national security protocols. Harper School was permanently closed, the building eventually demolished in 1952 to make way for a highway that conveniently erased its physical presence from the landscape. The two children who had exposed the truth found themselves in an uncomfortable limbo, celebrated privately by those who believed them, but publicly discredited by influential figures connected to Dr. Webb's work. Official records listed the Harper School incident as a case of administrative improprieties and unethical experimental treatments conducted by a rogue physician without proper oversight. The true nature and scale of what occurred remained hidden from public knowledge. Ruth Miller's body was discovered in the spring thaw of 1939 in a ravine 15 miles from where her car had been abandoned. The official cause of death was exposure, though the autopsy noted unexplained surgical precision in the removal of her eyes, a detail omitted from public reports. For the families of the treated children, life continued in a hollow parody of normality. The children performed well academically, never caused trouble, and grew into adults who functioned adequately in structured environments. They held jobs, followed rules, and some even married, though their spouses often reported a persistent emptiness, an absence of genuine connection. None had children of their own. Jonas never returned to Milford Haven. The town itself withered after the Harper School scandal, becoming little more than a footnote in regional history. His father, finally confronting the truth of what he had dismissed as childish fantasy, resigned from his postal position and moved the family to California, where the weight of complicity through inaction might feel less crushing. Catherine's father devoted his remaining years to developing therapeutic approaches for the affected children, searching for ways to rebuild what Dr. Webb had destroyed. His methods showed limited success. Neural pathways, once severed, could not be fully restored, but he documented small victories. A child who, after years of therapy, shed tears at music. Another who began drawing again, albeit in rigid, geometrical patterns. In 1963, Catherine Adams, by then Dr. Catherine Adams, published a landmark paper on personality reconstruction in post-surgical neurological trauma. Her work, rooted in the Harper School cases but never explicitly mentioning them, established protocols still used today for patients with frontal lobe injuries. She never married, dedicating her life instead to healing what she could not prevent. Jonas Fletcher became a journalist, specializing in investigating institutional abuses. His files on the Harper School case filled an entire room in his modest Burlington home. Newspaper clippings, correspondence with survivors and their families, and transcripts from government hearings gradually declassified over decades. He collected evidence of similar programs that emerged in other places under different names, always searching for Dr. Webb's signature methodologies. In 1978, he received an unmarked envelope containing a single photograph. An elderly woman in a laboratory setting, surrounded by uniformed men taking notes. Though her hair had whitened and her face had aged, the cold precision in Eleanor Webb's eyes remained unmistakable. On the back, a typed message read, "Project Mindseam continues." They renamed it, funded it, expanded it. The children were just the beginning. Jonas spent his final years trying to verify the photograph's authenticity and trace Project Mindseam through labyrinthine government archives. He died in 1992, his work unfinished but not forgotten. The last known survivor of Dr. Webb's procedures died in 2015, never having recovered what was taken from him. Before his death, during a rare moment of clarity, he provided a final testimony recorded by Jonas Fletcher's daughter, who had continued her father's work. The worst part wasn't the procedure itself, though I still remember the pain. The worst was watching myself disappear piece by piece, knowing what was happening but unable to stop it. Each day there was less of me remaining. I could feel portions of myself going silent, my favorite memories, my capacity for joy, my ability to resist. Eventually, I became exactly what they wanted, a perfect, hollow vessel that could be filled with whatever purpose they desired. When the mandatory sequestration period for the classified files expired in 2016, what emerged wasn't the full truth. Too many documents had been destroyed, too many witnesses had died, too many powerful interests remained invested in keeping certain aspects buried. What survived were fragments, enough to piece together the outline of atrocity, but not enough to hold accountable those who had authorized it. Harper School stands today only in memory and nightmares. The 16 children who vanished that autumn represent only the documented cases. How many others disappeared into similar programs remains unknown. The techniques developed there evolved into more sophisticated, less detectable methods of behavioral control. The crude surgical approaches replaced by chemical and psychological protocols that leave no visible scars. In a small cemetery on the outskirts of Burlington, a modest monument bears no names but a simple inscription: for the children who were silenced but not forgotten. Each year, flowers appear on the anniversary of Jonas and Catherine's flight from Harper School, left by those few who know the true story and understand its warning. The most dangerous darkness never announces itself as evil. It arrives in the language of progress, in the authority of credentials, in the promise of perfect order. It transforms brutality into therapy, control into care, and the destruction of humanity into its improvement. When we surrender our skepticism to expertise, when we value compliance over compassion, when we believe that some minds must be corrected rather than understood, we open the door to horrors that operate not in spite of civilization, but because of it. The 16 children who vanished from Harper School were never enrolled because they were never meant to be students. They were meant to be remade, prototypes for a vision of humanity stripped of the very qualities that make us human: our messy emotions, our stubborn questions, our wild creativity, our insistence on autonomy. Their erasure was not a failure of the system, but its deliberate product. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of what happened at Harper School isn't that it was the work of monsters, but that it was the work of people who genuinely believed they were creating a better world, one empty child at a time.